Batch number 2 for Sacred Nonsense. Let's go. The first thing Shelby ever said to me wasn't, hello, hi, how are you? It was, that girl has secrets. She said it to her friend. Loud enough that I could hear it, though, because we were standing outside of the mobile exchange at the day center on a Tuesday afternoon. We always went there on Tuesdays, like late afternoon, and she and her guy were just killing time. And Shelby was a drinker. Fireball, specifically, was the love of her life. Someone who only occasionally needed what we were offering at the syringe service program. She would just wander in the orbit, especially on Tuesday nights. Outreach is like the most fun. Like they already knew something you hadn't figured out yet. Definitely about reading the parking lot. Definitely about reading yourself. Because she looked at me and she said, I think she's going to be my friend. And she was right. She usually was sometimes rude about being right, but she was usually right. But Shelby had hepatitis C for 13 years before anyone helped her treat it. The system turned her away for drinking, her drug of choice. By the time I met her, she'd stopped believing people followed through. She'd filed that particular hope under things that happened to other people. So I went with her to her first appointment and to every appointment until they either no longer want or need us to go with them. She was a Cancer. She thought that I must have been a Scorpio because I had so many secrets. She loved to say, not every day is an ace girl. Weeks later, I got a call from her daughter, and she'd been hit by a car. She'd asked me if I had seen anything about her mom and what happened, and I said no. It had been in the news already. She'd been hit once forward and then once in reverse, and she didn't survive. So her death wasn't caused by Hep C or any other viral bloodborne disease. It wasn't the disease that we worked so hard to cure. It was something bigger, something harm reduction strategies just can't always fix. There's nothing we can do, no intervention, no strategy, no services we can provide to fix it. But the principles of harm reduction do soothe a bit. Not only do they soothe us, but they also soothe the person, because all of the principles that we measure our work are centering dignity, humanity, autonomy, and self-determination. And that does something for a person and their spirit when they've been denied those things by systems and institutions and culture. I felt lucky. When her daughter called, I never wondered if I had done her wrong, if I had done the wrong thing, if I could have done more. I knew in my body I had done my job. It couldn't have been different, not with those conditions. That moment, this society's continued refusal to do right by all its people. She had a lot of conditions that she was being ground down by. Public health's job was done. The hardest part of mine was just beginning, because nobody brings a casserole for that kind of loss. That's the thing about the drug war. It kills people in ways that the community grief apparatus doesn't recognize. Someone who's homeless, someone who's considered a drug user more than other people because she drinks Fireball whiskey on the curb and someone else drinks their Fireball whiskey in a bar. Occasional meth injection use when the streets required it for her to stay awake, to avoid horrific sexual assaults she'd already been victim of. The overdose awareness infrastructure, which is what harm reduction conversation centers on, wasn't built for her, and neither was the grief apparatus. The system applauded curing her hepatitis C, but had no mechanism, no framework, no field in the database for the fact that the conditions that were always going to kill her anyway were never the substance. They were never the drug. When we talk about drug set setting, we're really talking about risk set setting. And so much of a person's risk when they're using drugs, legal or illegal, is the conditions around the use. It's the set, the mindset. It's the setting. Who's there, where, when, what happened before, what happens after, how much, how potent. You remove the substance and the conditions are still remaining. It's conditions that kill. And there's a thing that happens to a person's inner pilot light when you are the state, when the conditions you're trying to name are also the conditions you've been trained to reproduce. You don't get to be whole in a system that's built on severance. Severance from self, severance from parts of self. And sometimes you look across the desk or the curb or the intake form and you see someone being asked to do the same thing, to cut that part of yourself off, to secure belonging through exile. In Shelby's video, the one she made before she died, where she said, I knew that girl got more stories than Walt Disney. And I thought, she is going to be my friend. Harm reduction is a genre. It has a structure. It goes like this. Here's a person the world decided wasn't worth the trouble. Now here's what they actually were in all of their humanity. And here's what it costs to see that. The fool doesn't wait for permission to run her errand. 0 permissions needed. 0 fucks given about making sense. She eats birthday cake. She sits on curbs at 3 a.m. with someone who got swept out of their encampment or just doesn't know where to go and talks about coffee mugs. The genre isn't separate from the survival. The genre is the survival. Some of us are wanting to know who else is out here. I think the answer is more of us than we think, and likely closer to home than we know. Prove me right, will you? This is Sacred Nonsense, where Shelby gets canonized right now. Saint Shelby, who shot dope in gas station bathrooms, but still held the door for the woman behind her, whose last text to me was asking if I could spot her for an airplane bottle of Fireball, who could read your whole interior life before you finished a sentence and would call it friendship anyway. This is where we stop apologizing and give ourselves permission for making art out of the hardest work most people will never understand. It's where we fund ourselves or learn to fund ourselves by being undeniably, specifically, irreplaceably real and exactly as weird as we are. Not every day is an ace. But some days you wander into someone's orbit and they look at you and tell you they're going to be your friend and they mean it. Sometimes they were already building the thing you didn't know you were waiting for. A container to show up with all parts of yourself, not one single bit severed. Sacred Nonsense is a communications production about harm reduction, about grief, and the absurdity of staying human in these inhuman conditions. The Fool's Errand is coming. The first real episode. So if someone sent you this, they must think you belong here. And they're probably right. I'll see you soon.